All right, so welcome holding by Pirke Avos, Ethics for Our Fathers. As is known, again, one welcome holding by Pirke Avos, Ethics for Our Fathers. We're in chapter 2, Mishna 16, it's part 44, probably part 45, 46, 47, as we work our way through. Again, one welcome holding by Pirke Avos, Ethics for Our Fathers, chapter 2, Mishna 16. The Mishna says, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So we're speaking about the last few weeks about the evil inclination, and as we mentioned, Tosef Yontif, one of the great commentaries on the Mishnah, in general, talks about, when he speaks about the evil inclination, he's talking about desire, right? Obviously, the majority of desire means, what does the inclination want to do? Destroy us. All right, very good at what it does. Doesn't need me to agree. Do the wrong thing. Yeah, through our base desires. And we said before, difference of opinion, the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, Leviticus chapter 19, right? It says to be holy. Torah says to be holy because God is holy. So Rashi over there says, talking about staying away from forbidden relationships. And the Ramban says you have an obligation to eat and drink, sustain the body, but no one says you should be a glutton, right? No one says you should be obese, and no one says, you should be an alcoholic, right? So a person has to stem their desire, have to work on their desires, have discipline. So, as we always say, there is a mind to heart disconnect, what the Orthodox calls the soul is the intellect, right? The intellect may know what the right thing to do is. We always say that 97% of the game is knowing what to do. Doing it, is a whole different thing, right? In general, but the inclination comes along and wants to basically, to tempt us, to test us. Now, evil inclination come in many different forms. It can, a person, let's say, coming back to Torah mitzvahs as a Jew, or, as a non-Jew, want to convert, or, staying as Noahide, whatever it may be. Everybody is going to have temptation. Now, temptation, let's say for a Jew, in some cases may mean that, they have difficulty and, keeping kosher or keeping Shabbos, whatever it may be. Probably the more they learn, probably the easier it becomes. They don't feel necessarily that they're lacking, in anything, but nonetheless, people around them, are going to tell them, like, why are you doing this? These are all antiquated laws. Why don't you hang out with us? Friends can do that. They want to see, the same old person that they used to know, they just hang out with, and, whatever. They don't want to see that they're restricting their lives and no fun to be around anymore, right? A lot of temptation. And then that gets a person to think. And they're going to say, well, why am I really doing this? What is the purpose of what I'm doing? Maybe they're right. Maybe they have a point. Maybe, I can be more moderate. I can do, other things. I can hang out with them. I heard a great rabbi once saying, the temple was destroyed, second temple was destroyed by Sinas Chinam, right? By unlawful hatred, right? Sinas Chinam, Lashon Hara. So what is Sinas Chinam? What is unlawful hatred? So it means like this, or the way he explained, right? Like this, that somebody that is less religious than me, right? So a person may say, I can hang out with them, I like to hang out with them, whatever, but I'm not going to learn with their actions. I'm not going to do the same things that they do, but I can hang out with them. Nothing wrong with hanging out with them, right? That's obviously debatable, but okay. What about someone more religious than them? They're going to be on the defensive. In other words, they're going to say, I am an Orthodox Jew. I keep Torah mitzvahs, right? They're going to be on the defensive because you won't eat in my house. You don't trust my kashrus. Different things. They'll get offense. They'll take it. They'll be offended. They'll be offended. Now, someone who wants to hold by a higher standard, right? Look at what the person's saying. Someone's someone's keep Torah mitzvahs or in a much lower standard. I can hang out with them, right? Not necessarily going to learn from their actions, whatever. I can hang out with them. Okay. Someone who has a higher standard, you're not going to say that. We're not going to say I want to hang out with them. Whatever. They're going to say, oh, you don't think I'm Jewish. Well, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. Yeah. Oh, you don't think I'm religious enough. You don't think. And, person never said it. They never made a statement. The other person feels uneasy. Why does the other person feel uneasy? Because they feel like they're being judged. Oh, my clothing's not good enough for you. My kashrus level is not good enough for you. That's sinas chinam, right? That is unlawful hatred. Yeah. So what does evil inclination do? What does evil inclination do over here? Evil inclination turns this person on its head, right? On their head. Why? Someone who's less religious, what are you going to tell me? The person will say they're less religious. Well, don't you think hanging out with them is going to have negative effects? What they say, vulgarity, right? How they speak, lashon hara, how they mention, how they dress, and other things. That'll have an effect. That'll have an effect. Yeah, a person may say, I'm immune to that. Now, either person's dead inside, which could be, right? Their soul is totally demolished. Again, could be. I'm not saying not, but I would say in such a case, how are you not affected? We're affected by it. We're affected by what we see. We're affected by what we hear. Nobody is immune over here. Some more, some less, whatever. But to say someone, let's say, not religious or whatever, they're not going to affect me, that's a lie. That 100% is a lie. Yeah, they're not trying to draw them close. That's not their goal. Their goal is to hang out with them because they like to hang out with them. Okay. So how can their values stay the same? How can they not change for the worse? Very possible. Because you're not strengthening yourself, you're going to them, you're hanging out with them. So the mistake is the person will say, yeah, that's no big deal. I'm immune to what they say or what they do. Now, first of all, it's not true. That's for sure not true. It does affect the person. But even if that would be true, let's say, we'll play devil's advocate here. Let's say it's true. Let's say what they say is true. They're immune. They're immune. Yeah, is that going to be a good thing? What they're doing, is it good? And what if they're not totally immune? What if it does have an effect? They'll say, well, okay, I guess it had a little bit of effect. How can it not? What a person hears. What a person says. So what do they want more than anything else? They want you to be like them. That's what they want. They don't want you to be this fanatic or whatever. And what are they going to do? They are going to wear you down. Right? That's their goal. 100% that's their goal. They are going 100% try and wear you down. So sometimes, we have no choice in this case. We have to be around these people. Yeah, maybe for work, maybe for other things. Okay. But at the same time, a person's walking a tightrope here. Right? And the problem is that even if a person's strong, let's say, or they think they're strong, what does the evil inclination do over here? The evil inclination starts to make you think. Yeah. Maybe Yeah, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe I have who to rely on. Why do I have to, stay in the straight and narrow path? Why can't I have a little fun this way? Again, I'm not saying things that are like totally wrong, per se. I'm not talking about that. That would be obvious. Yeah, what about things that are like borderline? Borderline, right? We spoke about, I spoke about this a number of times. I spoke about sporting events, yeah? So what's the problem? What's the problem with these sporting events? If it wasn't a problem, let's say, of immorality, people, hearing things or, the way people speak or whatever, right? What would be the biggest problem? Right, for a guy who's got an obligation to learn Torah, yeah? What would be the biggest problem? Biggest problem you can tell me is wasting time when you could have learned Torah. I mean, that's a serious problem, but that is probably the biggest problem. Now, the question always is what I'm doing, is it good for me? Is it good for my soul? Or is it not good for my soul? Yeah, it's very good before Rosh Hashanah, right? A person has to decide. They have to make a decision, not just roll with the punches. How do they want to live their life? How do they want to be perceived? In God's eyes. Yeah, forget about people. People, different issue. In God's eyes, right? Is this going to be beneficial for my connection to God or not? Now, sometimes person caught up in desire, you don't even think these things, just do it, right? Because you get caught up in things. Okay. But before that happens, people justify. We justify all the time. People say, majority of Jews don't know anything, right? You got 13.5 million Jews, don't even know Shema Yisrael, right? They don't, they can't even read Hebrew. Most of them are intermarried. Okay. So they're doing that, watching some, funny animal videos, like God's really gonna, zap me. God's gonna punish me for that. Look at what's going on around the world. Yeah, look what's going on. So it's not like you're not doing anything. You are working hard, you are striving, whatever. Okay. The person wants to kick back. Very good. They want to kick back. Now, does that help you in your relationship to God or not? Well, some people say yes. They'll totally justify it and say there's nothing wrong with it. Because look at what other people are doing. Now, in the bigger scheme of things, they're right. What other people are doing are 10 times worse. Sporting events, I would say, is less on the agenda. Less of an issue. Movies might be a different issue because then you got vulgarity, you got, immorality, you got all kinds of things, right? So that would be a different issue. But you're gonna say, like, a person in the sports, oh, it's so bad. Why is it so bad, so to speak? Right? So, I mean, there can be bad values, no question. You see how people act or whatever, but in general, right? In general, the best we can say is the problem is bittul Torah for a guy. For a woman, it wouldn't be an issue, right? But for a guy, it would be, probably should be learning. Why waste your time doing this? All right, and that's something, by the way, Jerusalem Talmud says that God's not mavater. God's not look the other way, right? The 3 cardinal sins you have to give up your life for anytime, any place, murder, immorality, or, idolatry. God can overlook, right? God can even overlook that. But the Jerusalem Talmud says this, you can't overlook. When a person had an opportunity to learn and didn't learn, right? Again, not when he was busy, not when he's working or doing other things that he's obligated to do. That's a different issue, right? In this case, he could have been learning, so he's not. He's wasting time. Okay. Now, at the end of the day, this is bad for me. Right? I'm not even saying vulgarity and other things. Right? It's a waste of time. Now, people are going to say, well, it's enjoyable. Or whether, it's fun. Or they're going to make probably a stronger argument. Look at what's going on in the rest of the world. Look what Jews are doing in general. And they're going to say, this is not the worst of all things. Now that I would agree. It's not the worst of all things. And plenty of worse things. Plenty of worse things. Yeah. But what systematically is the problem here? Systematically, the problem is, and people say, and I've heard people say, quite a bit, and that is that, God should cut me some slack because of what's going on around me. And the answer is, like, who are you comparing yourself to? Right? 95% of people would rather die than think. There are people that don't think today. Many, many people don't think today. Biggest question they've ever asked in their lifetime: ketchup, mustard, relish on a hot dog. That's where they're holding. So you got to say, I'm holding better than these people. Okay. Right? I'm holding better than these people. Who are you comparing to? You're comparing to someone that, all they're thinking about is their stomach. You're thinking about, somebody, they don't care. They don't care about anything spiritual. And the ones that say they do, they're lying. But okay. Well, they don't care, essentially. So if they don't care, and you can say, I'm holding better than them. Well, she gave us, a rounding stand of applause. Yeah, that's beautiful. You're holding better than the least common denominator. Okay. Yeah, in God's eyes, like, you're in serious trouble. Like, that's exactly what God's going to say. He's going to say, what do I care? What do I care about people around you? You have an obligation to reach whatever potential you have. That is your obligation. Whatever potential you have an obligation to try and reach it, right? To the best of your ability. So either I'm doing it or I'm not doing it. Either I'm going in the right direction or I'm not going in the right direction, right? There is nothing in between. People make that mistake and people say, I'm good. Saying I'm good means it's like, going on a treadmill and going nowhere. Like it's the equivalent of being happy or mediocre. Go into a job interview and tell them you're that all your qualities that they want, you're mediocre in some of them. They'll never hire you. They're not interested in mediocrity. They want to know what you bring to the table. How are you going to help our company? How are you going to help it grow? How are you going to help, in these other things? So if we're going through life, which we are, right? If we're going through life, and life is about what I do. It's about what I say. It's about how I act. Yeah? It's not about the people around me per se. God will deal with that. God will deal with that. That's not our issue. Our issue is, regardless of what's going on around us, I have to be the best I can be in God's eyes. That means I have to work on what I hear. I have to work on what I say. I have to work on what what I see. First, I got to be careful with everything they do. So you're going to say, but I got distracted. Well, doesn't the Ramchal talk about that? Doesn't the Ramchal say we're in a world of distraction? Yes. You got to navigate that world? Yes. That's why you have to be put in this world, to have a portion of the world to come. But you have to struggle. These are things you have to struggle with, whatever it may be. But everybody has to go through it. Some have it easier, some not, so to speak. But at the end of the day, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? When I had my own learning center, I asked these guys, married, sitting and learning full time. And I asked them the following question. I gave a schmooze, but I asked them the following question. It was a theoretical question. Not that I was looking for an answer, because obviously I had my own answer. But the question was, why do people sit and learn, after they're married? Right? There are a lot of people sit and learn for, I don't know, for however long, after they're married, their wife will help support them. Parents, in-laws, will help, whatever, for a certain amount of time, right? Let's say. Right? The person, is going to learn for X amount of years, whatever it may be. Some people go straight out to work, whatever it is. But if you're sitting and learning, right, and you're working on personal development, as well as to, acquire as much Torah as possible. When a person gets married, obviously the house looks different. If a person's, It's learning full time or if they're working. Definitely looks different. Okay, so why does a person learn? Why would a person do this? So I said I'm not looking for an answer. It's a theoretical question, but think about it. Are you doing it because, obviously you're not making so much money doing it. Okay. Well, what's the purpose? Are you doing it so you have a good name? Are you doing it so you kids, that was your goal because you want to get, a good marriage partner or like any number of reasons. Yeah. Or you don't want to feel like you're second class because you work, right? Or I don't know, I come up with a lot of reasons why someone potentially may do it. Yeah. Well, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of learning? Right? So the Ramchal in Path of the Just, the Ramchal says very clear. The Ramchal says that what am I doing in this world? What am I doing in this world? I'm in this world to enjoy God's goodness. How am I supposed to enjoy God's goodness? How's that supposed to happen? Well, he gave us a book, manufactured himself. Very good. I have to learn. I have to learn what he wants. Okay. Nonetheless, you'll tell me, as we said before, it's a world of distraction. A lot of very interesting things, other things out there. Okay. But what's the essence of what I do? The essence of what I do is draw close to God. Now, women don't have the same obligation to learn as men do. That may be true, but at the end of the day, they also have to know what to do. They also have to live inspired, right? So if a person gets carried away, totally carried away what's going on in society and other things, what's going to happen? The religiosity will go down. That's what's going to happen. That is direct effect. Direct effect. In other words, the more I'm in tune with what God wants, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? The more I'm in tune, the more I'm going to draw close to God. The more I'm going to want to keep more Torah mitzvahs. Yeah. If I'm less in tune, maybe I'll learn a little bit. Maybe, maybe I'll be a little bit more spiritual, depending on what it is. I'll do certain things. Other things I won't do, but I'm just as good as anyone else. But can you really say the same? Someone's really learning, let's say. They're really applying themselves. They're really working hard, right? They're really working hard. And learning and Musar, and ethics and other things. If someone say that they're not as in tune or whatever, or they're slacking off in different things, can they say they're the same? They can't say they're the same. Yeah. In the best of in the best of things. They cannot say that. Why? Because they're on the same standard. They're not doing the same thing. Yeah. So they're not the same. Yeah. Very good. But what's the goal for everybody? For everybody, what's the goal? It's the same goal. Is to attach yourself to God. That's the goal. Now, some people do it more, some people do it less. But don't we all at some level get distracted? Aren't there things that are distracting? Yeah. There are things that are distracting. Does God want me to be distracted? No. But, after we die, what can we claim? We can say you made the world too good. We enjoyed it too much. God says, God can say, I put it out there. You wanted to tap into it. You made it that way. Mankind made it that way. Okay. I didn't stop them. We're not robots. So you have to know how to navigate. Our navigation is hard. Why is navigation hard? Because we're torn in 25,000 different directions. Yeah. If we work, we're tied to the job, to the boss, to the goals of the firm, whatever it is, whatever we're supposed to do, and that's the most important thing. That's true. You get to do a good job, so you make money, whatever. But you're attached to these things, right? So, let's say you leave your job. Okay, you don't take your job with you. Very good, right? So then, a person's married, they have family, whatever. Okay, so now you get other issues. You got other things you have to deal with, right? As well as what you need to do. So you're torn in a lot of different directions. There could be health issues, there could be financial issues, there could be, 1.5 million different things that a person has to think about, which weighs down on a person. Okay. Yeah, but at the end of the day, person is trying to the best of their ability to attach to their creator. That's what they're trying to do. Now, obviously, it's not an easy thing. Yeah, it's not an easy thing. But the more we're surrounded by other things that are not good for us, navigation is hard. Right? I don't think there's any question. And what people say and how they say things and what people do, and people themselves want to turn us in different directions. Family members, friends, right? That's what we started off with. That's what they want. It's not the fact you're going to make them like you and you're going to be able to teach them, right? If they're a conduit that want to be taught and they're looking for information, God will put them in the right direction, right? You want to do the right thing, God will help you. You want to do the wrong thing, God won't stop you. Very good. Yeah, but for a person to think in general that they're going to have much more influence on someone else than they're going to have on us, right? They're kidding themselves, right? Again, I'm not saying someone can't try and do outreach, bring people closer. Okay, right? There is a danger, though. 100% there's a danger, right? And there are two schools of thought when it comes, let's say to have a guest on Shabbos. Two schools of thought. One is, I don't want to bring these people in my house. Why not? A person has kids. They don't want to talk about certain subjects. They don't have that influence. They want to be more insular. That's one school of thought. Yeah, they don't want to deal with these things. Yeah, why don't they want to deal with these things? Because the influence they're going to have. Possible influence. What's the second opinion? The second opinion is, okay, you do whatever you can to steer the conversation the right way, right? And you bring them in, to your community, whatever, and you have great influence. That'll have tremendous influence. Yeah, and you do your best if conversations go in certain directions. They try and stop it or steer in a different direction, whatever it may be. It's not about being insular, right? It's like returning their soul to them. Yeah, yeah. It's not even a question of propaganda or even trying to teach them just what they see at the Shabbos day, right? Just what they see by festival. Just see how people interact. Yeah, that in and of itself can change people, for sure. So whatever, two schools of thought. Two schools of thought. But when you're out in the world, and this is really the point, when you're out in the world, yeah, you experience all kinds of things, see all kinds of things. Yeah. Does it always have, positive reinforcement for what we want to do, what we want to be? No. Some of it, if not a lot of it, could be negative, right? But you got to say, this part I have to be part of at some level. Okay, you don't have a choice. But, at the end of the day, who we hang out with, what we see, and all these other things, we do have a choice. Right? Some things we don't have a choice. Some things we do have a choice. Now the question is, what decision do we make? Now, a person may say, with all these things, I want to chill out. I want to relax. Okay, so there are ways to do things in a kosher way. Yeah. Usually. But it's one major world of distraction. Huge distraction. Right? Now, seeing things, being part of things, other people are going to want to try and control us. Meaning, you have to see our, the way we think and what we do, and you're going to be tolerant and all, and all this. Right? So again, let's go back to one major fundamental principle. The major fundamental principle is it Torah true or is not true? You answer the kind of questions that we believe it's true. 100% you believe it's true. Okay. So you're going to tell me you believe it's true. Good. So the Torah is true. Do I have to live by it? You're going to say that's obvious. Yes. For a Jew, it's got to keep all the mitzvahs, whatever applies. Non-Jew, same thing, whatever applies to them, or if they want to convert. Yeah, then, if they're a full-fledged Jew, then, they're no different. They can keep what Jews keep. Okay. They're going to say, very good. So it's one way or the other, right? Totally one way or the other. But I agree, and everyone would agree it's true. Okay. Do I have to live by it? I have to live by it. Now, since I have to live by it, $1 million question is, I get stuck in situations which English would say a little bit dodgy. Yeah, a little bit problematic. I got coworkers, let's say. I got other things, family, whatever. You got to deal with these issues. And sometimes the issues not pretty. Sometimes, they're for sure not pretty. The Gemara says, Mishna Sanhedrin says, the world was created for me, i.e. for me and no one else. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean in general? It means I got to look out for myself. Right? We have an obligation to look out for ourselves. Protect ourselves. Right? If we have family, protect our family the best of our ability. That's our obligation. What other people think. Now, people say this all the time. I'm independent. I don't care. This and that. People are brainwashed. Totally brainwashed. Brainwashed by the media. Social media and the media itself. Whatever they say, people take it in. Yeah, we're totally influenced. People are totally influenced. Even if they say I'm independent, I can do whatever I want. Good. But here's a person stuck in a culture. Totally stuck in a culture. And you're going to go against, the tides? No, it's going to be so easy. Totally not going to be so easy. So what do I have? What do I have? I have over here where a person cannot worry what's around them. Why, again, if a person works, so, okay, certain things you may have to do, for the sake of the job. The question is a person and their values being compromised, right? So, whatever, there are a number of issues, spoken about this before. There are a number of issues in the workplace can be problematic. But at the end of the day, what people think and what's around us should not matter. It has an effect, but it shouldn't matter. Because what's my main focus? My main focus is spirituality. My main focus is doing what God absolutely wants me to do. That's my main focus, and should be my main focus. What's the problem? What's the problem? We get distracted. Right? You're totally distracted. And there are a lot of good distractions out there, unfortunately. Yeah, but at the end of the day, you're stuck in that environment. Even if a person lives, quote unquote, in a religious place, Jewish religious place, it's still the outer environment is still there. But even within the Jewish community, it also gets sucked in. It also gets sucked into the environment. Sales, this thing, that thing, the other thing. They get sucked in. It's possible. 100% possible. You got to be very, very strong. Mentally, you got to be very, very strong to not allow these things to influence. But a person lives in a consumer society, you can say, like, this is what's going on. Okay. But who says that? Tap into it. Other people out there, news junkies, want to hear, every 10 minutes hear the news, make sure they don't miss something or, who knows what. Okay, so, a person gets basic news. They know what's going on, more or less. Okay, but, I think some people get, way carried away. And who cares about all these political pundits and whatever? That's their opinion, but God runs the world, doesn't he? Right? I think King Solomon says the Proverbs, Lev Malachim B'Yad Hashem. The heart of kings is in the hands of God. So they're not in control. They're 100% not in control. God is controlling them to do certain things, whatever God wants them to do. Whatever the bigger picture is. He's the one in charge. So what do I care what these political pundits think? What does it matter? Shouldn't matter at all. If they're going to give their spin on this, that, and the other thing. I'll give an example. Give one example. All right, without getting into politics or anything else. Give one example. Mr. Putin goes into Ukraine. There's been major war for the last couple of years, whatever it is. Why all of a sudden now? Why did you decide all of a sudden? Because they'll come up with Webster's fifth definition of why they think. But from a Jewish perspective. From a religious perspective, what's going on? Now, some people would say, And people were saying at the very beginning, this could be the beginning of the war, Gog and Magog. Got nuclear weapons, this, that, but his goal was never to take over the world. That's not his goal. I mean, he wants to make Russia stronger and take maybe, some more land or whatever. But, I mean, he is a, egomaniac or whatever, but still, his ultimate goal is not to control the world. That's not his goal. Yeah. And he's having a hard enough time in Ukraine. They're going to have a harder time, with the rest of the world. But okay, even if he's got nuclear weapons, doesn't matter. Yeah. But from a Torah perspective, could that have led to the war of all wars and the Messiah is going to come? In theory. In theory. But you have to ask the ultimate question. And the ultimate question is, why now? Why now of all time? Why didn't he do it 10 years ago? Why didn't he do it 8 years ago? Why specifically now? Right now, people could come up with a possible answer. He's waiting, he's biding his time, he was this, he was that. Yeah. But what's the real reason? What's the real reason? The real reason is because God put it in his mind to do it, and he wanted it done now. And that's why he did it. That's exactly why he did it. What's the future ramification? Can't answer. Right? We don't, doesn't seem it's going to make World War III, but in theory it could. Yeah. But obviously God wanted it to happen. Why? Because that's what God wanted. Yeah. Want to speed up the process coming to the Messiah. Very good. This is part of it. How? How's it going to fit in? I don't know. Or maybe it's not a part of it. Maybe it's just something get sidetracked by. I don't know. Whatever it may be. Whatever it may be. Right? And all these political pundits and everyone else, giving their opinion. Who cares what their opinion is? Doesn't matter. The bottom line is, God wanted to happen. Why do it want to happen now? Good question. So you say that's what they're trying to answer, but they're not looking at it from God's perspective at all. Right? All these people are probably atheists, maybe. Or maybe some of them are atheists. So, okay. So I'm not going to look at it from God's perspective. They'll say all kinds of things. Yeah. Is it true? Is it not true? They don't know. It's conjecture. You're going to say, well, this person's been studying, Russian politics, for the last 30 years and whatever, this, that, and that. Okay. So it makes them an expert in Russian politics. Very good. But why people do things when they do things? So you tell me some things we can figure out. Maybe some things we understand according to nature. Why something may be done. Okay, if it's obvious. And if it's not obvious, and everyone and their mother is going to give their opinion. And who cares what they have to say, because they're not in God's psyche. They're not in God's mind. They don't know why God's pulling the strings like this, like that, or the other thing. They have no idea. You can tell me they could care less. Okay. But that's what's really going on. That's what a person has to remember. We're living in a world that's run by God. Very good. If that is the case, we're not prophets, not son of prophets, and God hasn't spoken to me lately or ever. But tell me why he's doing what he's doing. But isn't there an ultimate plan? It's an ultimate plan. Nobody can see God's face and live, right? Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to see God's face, understand what's going on in the world right now. God says you can only see me from behind. No one can see me at face value. Nobody knows. Right? It's all hiddenness within hiddenness. Now, could one of these political pundits come up with the idea that, according to nature may be the right answer? Could, in theory, could be the right answer. Okay. So even in theory, if it could be the right answer, yeah, the bottom line is God has an ultimate purpose. For everything that's done in the world, there's an ultimate purpose. Right? In our lives, there's an ultimate purpose. How we get there, how we navigate it, maybe we get sidetracked, maybe we take steps backwards. Yeah, a lot of things can happen in between. But there's an ultimate goal. And the most important thing of that ultimate goal is, I need to be better. I need to work harder. I need to stop wasting time doing other things and focus. What I need to be focused on. Now, first will say it's not easy to stay focused all the time. And how do you stop, from being burnt out? Good. These are good questions. But we have to stay focused. You got to keep your eye on the ball. You can't get sidetracked. And it's very easy to get sidetracked. But King David himself in Psalms says, you're only in this world 70 years. If you have strength, 80 years, and Kaufman would say anything else over that is a bonus. Okay. Well, what am I living for? I'm living for Torah. I'm living to do mitzvahs. So every day I can do mitzvahs, do more mitzvahs, as many as I can. Yeah, that's what I'm living for. These other things, distractions. They might be fun. They might be interesting, and some of them certainly could be 100% forbidden to do. But even at best, if a person wants to say the worst thing is it's a waste of time, I could be learning. But what does that do, though? Makes you a couch potato. That's one thing. It takes away the ability of a person to learn. It makes the person's resolve to learn Torah less. So the more a person feeds it, what happens? Spiritually, they get weaker. Right? This is what happens. Spiritually, a person will get weaker. Now, again, does that mean somebody's going to leave the fold altogether and not keep Torah mitzvahs? No. Doesn't necessarily mean that. Right? But the weaker they get, it's not going to help them. It could eventually lead to that. Yeah, so therefore, a person's going to be strong at all times. Because if you're not strong at all times, what's going to happen? You just get weaker and weaker and weaker. And eventually you say, what do I need this for? What do I need it for? I'd rather enjoy life. There are better ways to enjoy life. Okay? Anyone can make that choice. Anyone can opt out at any time. I've heard people say, what we do is like a little bit cultish, or it's part of a cult. Anyone ever, really know what a cult is? I tell people straight away, I can sign out anytime, sign off anytime. Don't put a gun to my head. Well, there have to be a lot of repercussions. True. Yeah, you don't fit in the community, you gotta go outside the community, whatever, other things. Yeah, it can be very complicated, very messy. Yes. But ultimately, do we have the choice? We have choice. Yeah. You can say, oh, I brainwashed so much, you would never do it, this and that. What do the Christians do? Not that we care. Yeah, first of all, they keep everybody ignorant. And second of all, they have a scare tactic. Major scare tactic. And what's the major scare tactic? The major scare tactic is, if you don't believe in JC, you're going to fry in hell forever. Well, that's pretty good. That'll keep some people in line. But the ones who are going to question and have issues, right, they're going to leave anyway. Yeah, and other people are just going to keep it, on basic things and don't think about it. They don't think about it, they're not going to question it. But there's a major scare tactic here. Now, you tell Jews that, that you're going to, that you're going to fry in hell forever, or, you're going to get seriously punished. Why won't a lot of them care? Because they've never been in that world and come back. They don't know what it is. They don't believe that such a thing could happen. Which is a mind-boggling idea, because, if there's even a 10% chance, of what the commentaries, what the Zohar and other sources tell us what possibly could happen to a person very good right before Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, why would anyone play Russian roulette? If a person had a gun, we'll make it very simple. Person had a gun, 10 bullet holes. You stick one bullet in, you close it, you say, okay, pull the trigger. Most people, let's say there are 6, right? Make it easier. There are 6, yeah? So you got a 16.6666 chance until infinity that you're going to blow your brains out. You got a 1 in 6 chance. How many people are going to pull that trigger? Probably nobody. Might have a wise guy here and there. Say, oh, I don't have anything before anyway, so I'll pull the trigger. Yeah, boom, they die. You're telling me it's a 16.666% chance. That means you have an 84% chance. Yeah, that's not going to happen. That's pretty good. I would say if you had a 1 in 10 chance, nobody would do it. Very few people would do it. If anybody. A 10% chance. Yeah? And what if it was even greater than that? Yeah, people still probably would be leery to do it. Maybe get some people to do it. Okay. But in general, why won't they do it? Even if the odds are much less that it would happen. Forget about the wise guy here and there. Why would most people not do it? Because they have the gun right in front of their face. They got the gun right in their hand. If they pull that trigger, they know it could happen. Even if the odds are very slim. Now, when you say, well, let's say there's a 16% chance, of what's told, what's going to happen when a person dies, and the punishments and all that. If there's a 16.6% chance, would you take the chance? Now, a lot of people would say yes. Why would they take the chance? Because they don't believe it's real. Right? They've never met anyone been in that world and come back. Now, what if they would see people have out-of-body experiences, and they all say the same thing, basically. That they see the light flash before their eyes, they see the soul hover over the body. Yeah. And they're drawn to this big light or whatever. Right? And a number of them will say they heard things they can't repeat what they heard. It's too terrifying what they heard. But they came back to the body. Now, people like that, first of all, they don't change automatically. They don't all of a sudden come to Torah mitzvahs or any belief in God or whatever straight away because, it's hard to change and people calm them down and whatever. Yeah. But even if they saw like a whole bunch of these people that that were clinically dead, had this out-of-body experience. Jews, non-Jews, Asians, blacks, Hispanics, whites, doesn't matter. Men, women, doesn't matter. Yeah, but they see something consistent. They all say basically similar things. Is that going to have an effect or not? Right? Would that have an effect? So I would think it may have an effect. It may have some level of effect. Why? Because you can't make this stuff up. All these people are not in cahoots with they're not all saying the same thing, living in the same place or whatever, and collaborating, to make this whole thing a hoax. But still, even if they heard all kinds of testimony from all kinds of different people from all walks of life, is that going to change their attitude or not? Now, it could be, maybe some people will. Maybe for some people it'll have an effect. Could be. And some of them will not take that chance. Some will say if it's a 16.6% chance, I won't take it. They're going to change their life slowly but surely. They're going to change. Other people are going to be skeptical because they're going to say these people are probably being paid to do this. Others, they'll convince themselves a million different ways why what they're saying isn't real, why it's not valid or whatever. Because they don't believe it's real. A gun in your hand is real. Spiritual things, abracadabra, is not real. So they won't say, I'll worry about it when I get there. Or I'm not even going to be worried about it because it's not going to happen. But again, think about it. If what the Torah says and what the rabbis tell us, in this case, you have let's say 10% chance you think it might be true. 10% chance. Would a person in general, would they want to go against what could happen for eternity? What the end result could be? Again, if you don't believe it, you say it doesn't matter. Right? I'll take my chance. But if there's potentially truth to it, it doesn't have to be a high percentage. Would a person really take the chance? Why would they take the chance? The only reason they would take the chance because they don't think it's real. That's the only reason. Yeah. What if they met somebody? What if somebody they know? Even better. They met somebody they know is clinically dead. Person comes out of it, well, they go through rehabilitation or not, whatever. The person, when they're somewhat on their feet, no pun intended. They speak to them. They speak to them privately, no one else around. I said, like, heard these things. Like, tell me, what'd you see? What did you really see? Like, come on, this is me. Like, what'd you see? I had somebody a while ago that was whatever, had to have, I think, a stent put in their heart or whatever, and basically was clinically dead. I mean, they brought him back, whatever, they brought him back. So I saw this person, whatever, a number of months ago, and whatever. I said, so what did you see? I said, tell me, if you were clinically dead, what did you see? He said, I saw the white wall. I didn't see anything else. I said, nothing? You didn't see anything? Okay, so now this is like out-of-body experience. Okay. But imagine, though, somebody asks this person privately. Nobody else around, no cameras, no nothing. And the person says to them, come on, I heard stories, I heard this. Like, tell me, what really happened? Tell me, this is me. Tell me what happened. He tells them the story. It's clinically dead. I saw my soul, I know there's a soul because I saw my soul hovering over the body, right? My body was there, couldn't move, couldn't do anything, but I was still there. I still understood what was going on. Yeah. I saw my life flash before my eyes, right? All these things, he said the same thing. Same thing he told other people. So he's telling them. Then I heard things. I heard people screaming. I could feel there was tension, this pain. People, crying out, people screaming, whatever. And I understood they were suffering, right? But it was made very clear in that world. Suffering for things that we've done. Yeah? So the person tells them basically what he said to everybody else. But he's looking him in the eye and saying, like, don't think I'm bluffing here. Like, I saw it. I witnessed it. Yeah, I heard it. And I saw I saw my soul. I saw my soul over the body. That's who I was. I was the soul. But now I was explaining to this person, there's this body and the soul. The soul is what makes you function. If I wasn't in my body, i.e. my soul, I would, body dies. Right? The body dies. And this person's not religious. But he's telling him what he saw. Now, how's that person going to take it? How are they going to look at it? Are they going to say this guy's a crackpot? Maybe. But if this person, let's say they've known for years. Let's say it's even better. They've known each other since they were kids. Yeah, they've known each other, I don't know, 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is. They know each other for a very long time. He knows this guy's personality. He knows he doesn't make up things. He knows he doesn't lie. Yeah. He's going to take this to heart. It's going to make him, at the very least, it's going to make them think. It's going to make this person think, well, what's life all about? What am I doing here? Yeah. Why did this soul come back? So maybe tells him other interesting details or whatever. But that's not a person on the street that's a wacko, total wacko, not the case. And that's going to make the person think. It's going to make them change. I don't know, but it's going to make them think. Now imagine if they want to do more research. They talk to somebody else who went through this. Someone they don't know. Yeah? Someone, they find the person, whatever, they go speak to them. Or whatever, speak to them over the phone, whatever it may be. And the person tells them something very similar. Now, this person could be a Christian, a Buddhist, it doesn't matter. Right? They say, I saw my life flash before my eyes. My soul was above the body, I could see it. I could hear everything. I could understand everything, but the body couldn't move, and I wasn't back in my body. And he says a similar thing. He said, I heard this screaming, people terrified, people suffering, people in, pain, whatever. And he says, he felt it, he understood. He said the same thing. He understood its repercussions for your actions. Right? And let's say the person also wasn't so religious before. Again, it doesn't matter, it's Christian, Buddhist, whatever. Yeah, let's say he wasn't so religious. But he tells a very similar thing that this guy he knew growing up said the same thing. Corroborate, same story corroborated. So again, maybe he'll take that more to heart. Maybe it'll make him think more, so to speak. So let's say, come on, like two people say the same thing. They don't know each other, they grew up differently, different religions, whatever. Now, if it's really spooked, which is probably going to be spooked at this point, because they both corroborate the same thing, says, okay, let me do it a third time. Let me find the third person. Third person went through this out-of-body experience. And lo and behold, the third person says the same thing. Right? One was a guy, one was a woman. One was was 48, and one was, 65, whatever it is. But they both corroborate the same story. Yeah, and they themselves looking different paths, the way they want to change or what they want to do, and in spiritual paths. Now, at this point, I would think this guy got to be totally spooked. Totally, totally spooked. Because they both said the same thing coming from different planets. Different ways of life. So both these stories he hears, and they say the same thing, and repercussions for your actions are different, whatever, this guy got to be totally spooked. Now, does that mean 100% is going to change? No. But I would think, if he hears from reliable sources, this is going to make him think. You're not going to just blow it off and say, oh, come on, I can't believe it. It's abracadabra, it's all magic, it's this and that. And who cares? Who cares? You don't believe it. So you're going to say 10% chance. Big deal. 10% chance. 90% it didn't happen. Good. So I'll take the 90% odds. But someone actually heard someone say it in front of their face, not as they saw in the video, whatever. Anything can be staged and who knows what, right? So they heard it with their own ears. People were not lying. They didn't seem to be lying. They didn't seem to be like, off their rocker. They seem to be normal people. Now again, is that going to get them to change 100%? No. That is seriously going to make a person think. And if a person wouldn't do that research, and let's say, because most people probably won't, a person would say, even if I heard about this and that, I'm not going to change. Right? It doesn't matter. Right? I don't believe in it, whatever, but that's the bottom line. They're not going to research it because they don't want to research it. They don't want to see it's true because they don't want to have to change. We'll make it very simple. Let's say somebody they know. They know him for so long. And they know this person. Like, come on, did you really see that? Did you really believe that? Maybe it's just all in your mind. Maybe you got hit too hard in the head. I don't know, whatever it is. And the person says, no, you don't understand. I saw it. I felt it. Yeah. It's going to it should have a major effect. Yeah, there's a book called The View from Above. Mentioned this before. The woman got clocked, I don't know, I think an Israeli woman got clocked on the head by a beam 5 stories up or whatever, critically dead, right? And had this whole out-of-body experience, whatever. I think 6-7 years after this experience she actually becomes an Orthodox Jew. Didn't happen overnight. Now, why didn't it happen overnight? Why didn't it happen overnight? Because it's hard to change. Not just it's hard to change, but people, around you, and this is really the point of telling all this, people around you are going to try and convince you. Nah, I didn't really see that. Come on, you really think so? Just be like everybody else. Like, they'll calm you down. They'll wear you down to the point where, not that you don't believe what you said. Not that you don't believe what you saw. Yeah, you still believe what you saw, but, like they say, you go back to normal. Right? It had its effect. And now you got to go back to everyday life. But then you get everybody in there, and their mother trying to convince you, forget about it, don't think about it. Don't overthink about it, They're paying a medication for you to take or whatever. But don't deal with it. Just go back to being who you were. What's the problem? And don't take a person out from what they saw, what they felt or whatever. It may nod them. 100% it may nod them. And they may think more into it, look more into things, but it's not a coincidence that a person wouldn't change straight away. It's definitely not a coincidence. Why? Because again, they have their whole life, what they've done before. All of a sudden, they had this experience. Okay, it's a major trauma, a major experience. But to say now that's because of this and that, now I'm going to have to change and change my life, and go against the tide and go against everyone around me, that's a much harder thing. But the story of a boy had this out of body experience. I don't know, it's 14, 15-year-old kid, Israeli, and, not brought up with, too much Torah mitzvahs at all. I don't forget exactly what happened to him, but I had this out of body experience. He had this out of body experience, and, he was telling the story, whatever. And whatever, this rabbi was like interviewing him, etc. So somebody asked this rabbi, like, why have you not sent this kid to yeshiva? Why have you not sent him to a Torah school yet? Not exactly the time frame from, when this kid died, he came out of it, and there's rehabilitation, or there wasn't, or whatever. How much? I don't know what the time frame was. From that point to now, to when they're doing this, whatever, when they're doing this interview. One of the things the rabbi said very clear. He said the person had a major trauma. Okay, he understands this Torah mitzvahs is, God gave Torah, to Moshe Mount Sinai, and right, he knows he has to go from A to B. He said you can't expect the person that's brought up with nothing to go from A to B, overnight. Yeah, even if they were in that world, that's what he's saying. Amazing, amazing idea. Even if he's in that world, even if he understands clear as day what was there and what transpired and all that, very good. Yeah. Get the person to change straight away afterwards? No. Very hard to do. Forget about how old the person is. It doesn't really matter. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, you can't take someone from, you can't take someone from A to G and make them, jump through hoops straight away. It's not going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen. Whatever you think, it's step by step, right? Small step by small step. Some people maybe take bigger steps. Okay. Yeah. But in the bigger scheme of things, the person's not going to jump so high, so fast, even after that experience. Right? That's what a person has to realize. But, if they have people around them, and I guess this is really the point, if they have people around them trying to say, no, they're not saying, oh, you never saw it, we don't believe you, right? Maybe some are, right? They're not saying that. They're just saying, like, even if you saw that, let's say, even if you saw that, okay. Come on, you're going to be like these right-wing fanatics. You're not going to do the same things with us anymore. You're really going to change because you got clocked on the head and like, I believe in all this religious stuff. Well, they say, listen, look what I saw. Look what's it. But what does that do to a person? The person may think to themselves, did I really see it? Is that what really happened? Maybe I'm just imagining it. Maybe, I don't know. I ate something that was too sharp. I don't know. Whatever. That's what the evil inclination will do. The evil inclination will try and calm the person down. And a person go back and forth. I saw it. I didn't see it. Maybe they say 100% they saw it. And they know what it is. Now they know what it is. But they get so bombarded from all sides, trying to convince them not to go in that path, not to look into things further, stay the way they are, be like the way they used to be. And this is a much stronger case because here they understand what they saw. They don't deny what they saw. And they'll say it over and over again what they saw. Okay. Now that has a profound effect on the person. But now you get everybody else trying to convince them. They're not trying to say, you didn't see it. Even if you did see it. Come on, you're really going to change? You're going to be like this right-wing fanatical nuts? You're going to start, you're not even going to pick up the phone on Shabbos? This is what you're going to do? That's going to cool down a person. Yeah, depending on how strong they are. So if that's the case, and they saw these things in the spiritual world, let's say, this is what they saw, and that's the pressure they're getting. Imagine if that didn't happen, and we're surrounded by these type of people, what it does to us. If it's going to affect the person in that sense, like, As we said before, it took a person 7 years. That's what they said, 7 years for them to become an Orthodox Jew. Guaranteed there's probably a lot of pressure. I read this book in a long time. Probably a ton of pressure. Yeah, a ton of pressure not to do anything. Stay the way they were. And that is something. It's not something you just blow off and say, that doesn't really matter. Right? It's not true. People are seriously putting pressure. And they're going to say for the right reason. Why are they putting pressure on you? Because they don't want to lose you. Yeah? Someone becomes religious, let's say they move to Israel or, whatever they do, and someone else says, yeah, I don't want that to happen to my kid or my grandkid. I don't want them to end up like that. Meaning, if they would ever try and do such a thing, they try and convince them the other way, right? That's initially what they're saying, right? We already lost one, we don't want to lose more. So what would a person do? If that was the direction a person was going to go, they try to do whatever they can to try and talk them out of it, if possible. That's the pressure a person can feel. Now, what if a person gives into it? What if a person has a weak resolve? Okay, that's something the person has to work on, right? But it's a normal, everyday type of thing. Family, friends, co-workers, whatever. Yeah, a person going on a new path, that's exactly what they want. They want you to be back like them. They don't want you to change. They want to be fanatical. Don't listen to this one. Don't listen to that one. Come on, why can't you just go out with us, have a drink? What's the big deal? Right? So the person will think, well, is there really anything wrong with it? Maybe they'll say, no, at best it's this, or at best it's that. So really, really to keep these friendships, which a person may want to for whatever reason, person may convince themselves and do it, let's say. But then again, what's going to happen? They may regret it. Then afterwards, they regret, I can't believe it did it, whatever. But peer pressure is very strong. Very, very strong. So if a person wants to stay on the straight and narrow path, you can't get sidetracked. 100% you can't get sidetracked. Because once you get sidetracked, once you give in, what happens? What happens? Game over. I'm not going to say 100% game over, but I would say it's going to be much, much more difficult to stop. Right? Because the pressure, because the pressure itself is enormous. Right? And a person can't think, well, I can have the best of both worlds. So I can tell you that doesn't work. That you'll give into one world much more than the other. So, a person has to be careful. There has to be, as we always say, there has to be some level of balance. Sometimes we get convinced, we think this is going to be good. Now, in the bigger scheme of things, I would say, if a person, let's say a person gave in. They gave in, ultimately, they got pressured. They didn't really want to give in to what they gave into. Okay, they say, you know what? Okay, fine. Person's like badgering them, whatever. Fine. I'll go out with you. Yeah. They're all ecstatic. It's great. We're going to have a great time, whatever. And you still have these feelings of like, it's really the right thing. Should I really be doing it? But let's say at the end of the day, what happened? What happened for the betterment? You felt awful about what you did. You felt tremendous guilt for what you did. But not only that, damage was done. Let's say you hurt things, you saw things, whatever, and it had a negative effect. Still gets stolen. Now, hopefully, if that happens, God forbid, but if that would happen, what's the person going to say? What would a person say? They would say, you know what? I got the message. I got the message. I shouldn't have done it. I paid a price for it. I'm not going to do it again. Now, let's say a week later, 2 weeks later, same thing. Come on, we're all going out, this, that. And you know what you went through before. Yeah, and it made you feel bad. All kinds of things. A person at that point can be much stronger and say, they can say to themselves, you know what, I got to get out of this because I know what the effect is. I know what's going to happen. Potentially. And it's not going to be good for the relationship between themselves and God. They know it's like taking 3 steps backward. So a person can be convinced of that. They can know in their heart, in their mind, this is the wrong thing to do. But again, peer pressure, being badgered, but you knew the experience was bad. And you know this experience also probably bad. A person has to have a very strong resolve. I'm not saying it's easy, right? Yeah, I'm not going to say it's easy. But again, we have an obligation to protect ourselves, to protect our souls. That's our obligation. We have to do it to the best of our ability. But guess what? The evil inclination doesn't stop. Doesn't stop for 1 second. The evil inclination keeps coming and coming and coming, all kinds of different ways. The evil inclination comes and say, really, it's not so bad. Maybe, at best, maybe, it's a rabbinical infraction and, it shouldn't have that negative effect. I should be strong, whatever. 1.5 million different ways why a person would be convinced that it shouldn't be so bad. Yeah. But they give in a second time, and the same thing happens. This time it's worse. This time it's worse. Now, a few things can happen. One is, a person may think, God's never going to, accept my forgiveness. I can't believe I fell a second time, and this and that. And the resolve gets weaker. When the resolve gets weaker, what does the evil inclination do? The evil inclination comes and goes for the jugular. The evil inclination comes and tries to pounce and tries to get you to do other things. But now the evil inclination has an easier time. Why does the evil inclination have an easier time? Because now you've been opened up so much that the evil inclination is going to come and say, okay, I had it harder before, and I had to badger you this way. I had to badger you that way. I had to have other things happen, and I got you. Yeah? And now comes the second time. Second time made it much easier. Why? Because if it was hard enough the first time, you were opened up. Now the fact you were opened up more, the inclination has an easier time. Because, now you justify it more. Maybe it won't be so bad this time. I would say second time it's bad or it's even worse. So then the evil inclination come along, not necessarily get you to do it again, per se, but now give you all these feelings of guilt. Can't believe I did it, can't believe I gave in, can't believe this, can't believe that, can't believe the other thing, very good. Yeah, they got trapped, 100%, right? 100% they got trapped. So the fact that they got trapped, now they feel there's no way out. Now they feel, I've heard this many times, different people, now they feel God's never going to accept their repentance. God doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Whatever they do now is not going to matter. Yeah. So the resolve gets weaker, much weaker, and they give up. They lose hope. Right? So the evil inclination badgers, finally finds a way in somehow. And then within that, they just open it up. The evil inclination opens it up tremendously and gives the person the feeling that it's no possibility to help. There's no way out of this. All the things are going to happen. It's going to be, person is going to spiral into a spiritual abyss. That's what's going to happen. They're going to spiral out of control. They're going to say there's no way to fix it. I can't get out of it. I'm stuck. They're going to be mi'ayish. They're going to give up hope, and that's it. That's what the evil inclination does. But again, how did the evil inclination start? All it does, and all it wants, is to make a hole in the armor. That's all it wants to do. Once it makes a little bit of a hole, it's only a matter of time before that hole expands. And then it expands more. Right? As we said before, the evil inclination is not coming to tell you, I want you to desecrate Shabbos. I want you to do idolatry. The evil inclination knows you're not going to do that. Right? The evil inclination knows very clear you're not going to do that. So what does the evil inclination do? It works on smaller things. Much smaller things. And eventually the smaller things expand to potentially bigger things. Somebody, let's say, for example, someone, let's say, grew up religious, and they have midlife crisis, let's say, and they give up Torah mitzvahs. Not that something traumatic happened, but they gave up Torah mitzvahs. Why did they give up Torah mitzvahs? They didn't give it up all at once for something. It means there was already a hole there from many years before. Yeah, there was already a hole there. There's already discontent. There was already unhappiness there for whatever reason, and it just got buried or whatever. Then eventually the person said, I'm just living a lie. And because they're living a lie, they're like, I might as well just do what I want now because, I can't live this way anymore. But it didn't happen overnight. And most of the things don't happen overnight. It irked the person. Maybe a person did it, I don't know, for the sake of their kids. Maybe they did it, because they wanted to work on their evil inclination. But now it got such to a point where now they leave everything. They're gonna think, but how could that happen? So these things don't happen overnight. What happens is little by little, it festers, it gets stronger until finally a person feels they can't live with it anymore. They can't change it. This is what they feel, and they give up. And eventually they say, like, I just don't want anything anymore. But it didn't happen because of one event. Right? That's a mistake. Maybe by some people, they went through a trauma, whatever. Okay, but for most people, it's something that's been festering for a long time. Right? Could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be less. Doesn't matter. But it's been festering over time. And now it got to a point where, quote unquote, the law of no return. Now, they can't come back. They might, now they're going to leave everything. But again, that's the same situation. That is the exact same scenario. And what did the evil inclination do? It just kept badgering for years. For years. Putting things in their minds. You haven't prayed any different in years. You haven't changed anything. You went through Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, this, that. Didn't really mean too much. You went through the motions, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But it gets to a point. It gets to a boiling point where the evil inclination doesn't let up. And then it makes you think all kinds of things. Some may be true. Some definitely may be true. But it's a way to break the person down. And once it breaks the person down, it's got all these openings. I mean, it's like, a person being attacked on all sides. It's almost impossible. I can say impossible. I don't want to depress anyone, right? It's almost impossible for a person to be able to fight it. Because they've already given in to certain things. They feel that they're at the point of no return. That's where they feel they're at. And they can't change. Yeah, and the evil inclination, see, you can't change. You don't even want to change. You don't even think it's so bad. So why bother? You're going through the motions. God's never going to accept it. Forget it. Like, just give everything up. Move on with your life. Do what you want to do. And that's it. And some people will do that. There is a phenomenon. People have this quote unquote, midlife crisis. Yeah. In spiritual terms. But it didn't happen. The point is, it didn't happen overnight. That is the point. It festered and festered and festered until the person said, okay, I've had enough, got beat down enough, and that's it. God can't expect anything else. But again, all that means is that the person had difficulty for so long, and now it got to the breaking point. Right? It's kind of like Wahab will make a big distinction here, but it's kind of like when the temple got destroyed. Right? The temple didn't get destroyed overnight. Right? As the Gemara says, it was like grinding up things already ground up. Like, in other words, the structure was standing there. That's why when Jeremiah is screaming at the people to repent, that God's going to destroy the temple, A, nobody wanted to listen, B, they wanted to kill him. Right, but they saw the temple still standing. They're like, "Why? God's not going to destroy his place. It's still there." Right, but he's warning them. This is what's going to happen. Right, so the Gemara says it's like a grinding of something that's already ground up. In other words, it's already been destroyed. The edifice is still standing there. The building's still standing there. Very good. You're right. It's standing there, but it's a shell of itself. Since it's a shell of itself, it's not going to take much to bring it down. Right? So again, we can compare that. I don't know, a good comparison, not a good comparison, but I think it's good enough to say that a person also is shell of themselves, no matter what they're going through. Meaning, they're going through the motions, but really, that's what they're doing. They're just going through the motions. They're a shell of who they really are. And that, it's not going to take much to knock the person over. And the evil inclination knows that. So the evil inclination comes, tries to do all these other things and go for the knockout blow. And that's what happens. It's not usually from one event. Yeah, it could be. I'm not saying not. A person could go through an absolute tragedy, and guess what? They could break from it. Could happen, right? In these type of cases, probably not the case, right? In these type of cases, what happens? In these type of cases, as we said before, the evil inclination had an opening and kept pecking away at that opening. Peck, 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 right? It kept pecking away at this opening. And eventually what it did at some point, it got so wide open, and that's it. Could be one event, could be two events, could be 10 events, I don't know. Then at one point, somebody says, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live this way anymore. It's too much of a contradiction. It weighs on them so much, they collapse. That's what happens. Right? But again, the evil inclination doesn't rest. The evil inclination keeps coming and coming. Right? What's the antidote to the evil inclination? The Gemara says, Torah. That's the antidote. But you need God's help to overcome it. Okay. So if a person's lazy, right? Back to what we were talking about before. I'll take some questions here. Right? A person's lazy. Yeah, so, okay, so, they watch part of a ball game. They waste their time doing something else. It's a big deal. Right? It's a big deal. So I need to chill out. This is what I did. Good. Yeah? But what did that do? What did that do, essentially? That weakened the person's resolve. Yeah? Even a little bit. Let's say it's only a little bit. Okay. Now, what happens the next day? No, you're not so tempted. You are focused. Very good. Yeah? What about the third day? Same thing. So, okay, the more a person strengthens themselves, the less this has an effect. But the more they give in, whatever the desire is, then that becomes addictive. Once it becomes addictive, it makes it much harder to change. Much harder to change. Right? You take someone who grew up as a sports fan, as an example. You take somebody like that. Yeah, you're gonna purge it out of their system? No. Not gonna purge it totally. Yeah, I've heard some people say, like, isn't this a waste of time? Isn't this? And first some people say that, okay, there are worse vices, whatever, and it's not as bad as other things. Now that's true. That I would agree is 100% true. But again, to uproot it totally is very hard. It's like any bad character trait. You want to try and uproot it. The problem is, the more you feed it, the harder it is. Right? The harder it is to uproot. All right. Somebody asks, let's deal with a question here. Somebody asks, the only comparison that we should do is somebody keeps more mitzvahs. Very good. Right? Somebody keeps more mitzvahs than life. For the sake of personal development, what are mitzvahs supposed to do? Right? What are mitzvahs supposed to do? God says, I want you to have a connection to me. So how are we supposed to have a connection to God? Through Torah. He has a book, manufactured himself, right? It's called the Torah. So the mitzvahs that I do strengthen me in keeping God's will, keeping what God wants me to do. Now, that being said, there are plenty of things, the mitzvahs strengthen us, okay. But then what about character traits? Person can do the mitzvahs and still have bad character traits. Yeah, the mitzvah is supposed to strengthen a person. Very good. And if a person doesn't learn Mussar, they don't learn ethics, how are they going to change? How are they going to change? Right? There are mitzvahs that are, definitely more ethical. You're not just about say this, don't say that, whatever. We're talking, it's also ethical in a certain sense. right? But there are commands. Let's say Leviticus chapter 19. Don't bear a grudge or don't take revenge, right? So these are things that I have to work on, right? These are things I have to work on because bearing a grudge is bad. Now you can say, but this person deserves it, or whatever. Okay, any psychologist will tell you bearing a grudge is bad. Festering in your soul is bad. Yeah? Because then you're just thinking about it more and more and more. You're not going to let the person off the hook. You might say, bad things against them. Okay. But at the end of the day, this is about personal development. That's true. Yeah? Not bearing a grudge. And understanding why you shouldn't bear a grudge. Okay. So I have books of Musar that can teach me how to work on anger. How to work on, being happy, helping others, whatever, a million different things. They don't fit under necessarily certain categories, right? Certain mitzvahs per se. Some do, for sure. Yeah, but they go hand in hand. In other words, a person may say, okay, if I take, here's my lulav, right? So, getting ready for sukkah. So if you see my lulav and I'm shaking it like this and I'm shaking it like that, what does that do with personal development? You say nothing, right? I'm doing the mitzvah itself. Okay. Now, on one hand, when I'm doing that, don't I have to be careful. If I'm near someone else, that I shouldn't poke them with it, right? I have compassion for. I mean, you can learn certain things of character development within every mitzvah. Certainly within every mitzvah, some more, some less, right? Doesn't matter, right? But it's brought down derech eretz kibbul Torah. Derech eretz literally means the way of the earth, right? But it means character development. Character development came before the giving of the Torah. What does that mean? It means if a person's learning Torah in general, you have to work on character development. That comes first. Because if a person, is not nice to others, they have bad character traits, how can they learn Torah? One of my rabbis, the blessed memory, once told me he was learning under somebody, and this person he said was a Talmudic genius. He didn't tell me who it was, right? But he said it's an absolute genius. Talmudic genius. He said he didn't last more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I mean, also happened to be a genius, but he said he didn't last more than 2 weeks learning by him. Why? He said his character traits were so bad. He didn't tell me what, where, when, and how, but he said his character traits were so bad I couldn't learn Torah from him. Yeah. So the Gemara Chagiga says that a person wants to learn Torah from a rabbi, he has to look at that person like he's an angel. Now, does that mean he's an angel? No. Does that mean he's perfect? No. Doesn't mean that. Right? You gotta look at him like, you gotta be on you gotta put him on a higher pedestal, let's say. Okay. Yeah, but that person has bad character traits in general. So then Torah is mental gymnastics. Torah is just like an academic subject. But what should Torah do to a person in general? Torah in general should make a person more moral, have better character traits. Right? It should change a person. If it doesn't change a person, again, it doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean we don't have an evil inclination. What it means is if I'm not trying to reach my potential, working hard, then I'm learning Torah like an academic subject. Like as Ramosh Schneider, bless him memory, my Rebbe's Rebbe would say, you're learning like a frummer student, an ultra-Orthodox student. Yeah? That's how you're learning Torah, like an academic subject. Torah's not an academic subject. Never do this, but I was once learning with my Rebbe Sefer Mitzvahs the Rambam, right? And that's how I really began to develop my connection. One day a week, with just me and him, right? He really spoke, and I just listened. Which his son once told me, it's like I never saw my father, do this with anybody. So I don't know what your merit is. So you listen, sit down, you brush up on your English, you learn something. So anyway, I have my tape recorder going. He's giving me this class Monday night. So he's giving me this class. and he's talking about the importance of learning Torah. Yeah, so we said that his Rebbe or Moshe Schneider, bless him memory, once, he said many times, you can't learn Torah like a former student. You cannot learn it like an academic subject. So I asked him after that, if somebody learns Torah like an academic subject, do they get the mitzvah of learning Torah or not? That was my question. Now, he didn't want to answer. He's like, right? He didn't want to answer. So, again, never do this. But, so I asked him again. I mean, that you could do. He asked a second time. So I said, but what, does he get the mitzvah of learning Torah or not? So again, he hemmed and he hawed and this and that. He didn't give me an answer. He didn't give me an answer. Yeah. So never do this. So I wanted an answer. I absolutely wanted an answer. And obviously he didn't want to give me an answer. So I stood up. I banged my hand down on the desk, on his desk. Papers went flying. My tape recorder went flying. And the son comes running in. It's like, everything all right? It's like, yeah. I said, yeah, don't worry about it. It's fine. And, I pick up the papers, pick up my tape recorder. He looks at me. I look at him. I said, okay, I'm going to ask the question again. Again, never do this. Never, ever do this. Certainly to a Torah giant. Yeah. I said, does the person get the mitzvah of learning Torah or not? I said, what's the answer? Yes or no? Just tell me. Just tell me yes or no. So he looked at me and he goes, okay, fine. They get something, it's all called Talmud Torah. It's all called the mitzvah of learning Torah. I said, okay. I said, that's all you had to say. Can't believe you didn't throw me out at that point. Yeah, I got the answer. I wanted the answer. So again, I would never tell anyone to do that, but that's how I got the answer. Yeah. So what's the point? It's a good story though, but what's the point? The point is that if someone's going to learn Torah, Torah has to change. The goal of learning Torah is to change. Now, is change easy? No. Is changing one character trait, as Rabbi Israel Philanthropist, blessed memory, would say. Is that easy to change? No. You got to start somewhere. You got to work. You got to try to the best of your ability. Otherwise, game over. Good. So you have to work hard. Okay. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but if I'm learning Torah, not me, somebody's learning Torah, they get so much enjoyment from learning that that's great. But if a person's going to say there's no effect on my life whatsoever, and I'm just learning it like I learned mathematics, then that's a problem. Right? We don't compartmentalize over here. We don't say like Bertrand Russell, right? Went to my alma mater, Columbia, taught ethics, totally unethical. So they asked him, students asked him, how can you teach ethics to be unethical? Right? He said to him, I taught mathematics, expect me to be a square? Same thing with Aristotle. Go back to Aristotle. Aristotle did all kinds of terrible things. Students caught him once doing something kind of crazy. And they said, what are you doing? He said, today I'm not Aristotle. It's Aristotle, a great philosopher. Aristotle does these other things. That's not a Jewish concept. In other words, who you are and what's inside you, that's what you're supposed to do. Right? You're supposed to keep God's Torah the best, to the best of your ability. Right? It's not about saying one thing and doing something else. Again, does the person have an evil inclination? Yes. Is it hard to change? Yes. But the ultimate goal is I'm learning Torah in order that's going to change me. That's going to make a person a better person. Now, people from the outside looking in general will see amazing things. Husbands, treat their wives. Other kids treat parents. Right? They may not make the connection to Torah. They see the difference, though. They see a major, major difference. But you got to live it. Right? It doesn't mean there aren't distractions. It doesn't mean there's not evil inclination. Yeah, but at the same time, there's an ultimate goal. And what's the ultimate goal? Again, very good for Rosh Hashanah. What's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is for the sake of change. That's the ultimate goal. It's not just about acquiring information. Anybody can do that. Right? You have to have the desire to do it. Right? Getting information a person can get. But what's the purpose of the information? What's the purpose of what I do? The purpose of what I do on a daily basis Whether I understand it better or I don't, it's to draw myself close to God. That is what God wants. God wants you to enjoy His world. That's what He says. That's what the Ramchal says at the beginning of Path of the Just. God is a Meitiv. He wants to give His goodness. Certainly to us, He wants us to enjoy this world. Beautiful. And He gives a book. He manufactured Himself. Okay. But there's a world of distraction, He tells us. Right? There's a tremendous world of distraction. Okay. But if I stay on the straight and narrow path, I keep the Torah the way I should. I don't learn it like mental gymnastics. I don't learn it like an academic subject. I'm actually putting in the time and effort. You'll see the fruits. You will see the fruits. Person won't talk the same than they normally would. Person, won't do things like they normally would. Right? They're going to work on themselves. Again, does that mean a person won't have a relapse? No. Well, I mean, it's going to be easy? No. But it will change a person. It's impossible that it wouldn't happen. Right? Again, even if we have setbacks, doesn't matter. The goal is I want to be close to God. There's only one way to do it. I've looked for shortcuts, never found them. The only way is you got to sit and learn. You got to keep what He says to the best of your ability. You got to work. Right? You got to, anything worthwhile, you have to work hard for. Yeah, you have to work very hard. And the evil inclination doesn't let up. Yeah, at the same time, the more I do, the more I strengthen myself. Meaning, the Mishna Pirke Avos says to get there one day. Mitzvah gorer the mitzvah, avera gorer is avera. If I do a mitzvah, it's going to cause me to do other mitzvahs. If I transgress, God forbid, it's going to cause me to do other transgressions. So I got to stay on the straight and narrow path. It's not an easy thing. But at the end of the day, I have to want to. That's one thing I should pray for, by the way. That God should help me in this endeavor. Yeah. You want to be the best you can be. You want to help try and reach whatever your potential is. You need God to help you, right? But you got to stay focused. If you don't stay focused, you lose. You're going to lose your goal here, right? And you have to remember what the ultimate goal is. The ultimate goal is I have to serve God. That's the goal. And I have to serve Him to the best of my ability. Some days be easier, some days not. Some days we're more into it, some days not. Sometimes, we're thrown against the wall. We don't know what it's going to be. Right? Many different things. Many different things. But what do I have to do, though? What is my obligation? My obligation is I still got to do it. And I still got to keep what He says. And I have to go through this grind. It might be a grind. Okay. It might be. But at the end of the day, is it to my benefit or not? That is the question, right? And we're going to say it's to my benefit. Now, a person's not going to understand, in general, how this works. Meaning, if I'm shaking my lulav, right? Right again, here's my lulav, and I'm shaking it and singing, I'm shaking it like this, I'm shaking it like that, and I basically understand what I'm doing. Yeah. So you're going to say, like, come on, that makes me a better person. That's supposed to, it's supposed to make me a better person. It strengthens the soul, right? The soul needs to be fed. If you don't feed it with Torah and mitzvahs, what are you going to feed it with? Garbage. And when you feed it with garbage, what happens? You turn into garbage, essentially. Yeah? Because you go further and further away. And once you go further and further away from Torah, then you're no different than an animal. You're just maybe more intelligent. Yeah, you're a more intelligent animal. Okay. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to be a better person. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It doesn't mean you're not going to say things that you're probably going to regret, right? Or curse or other things. These things you have to work on. You have to make a plan. You have to see what triggers it and all these. Okay, there are a lot of things we're going to work on, right? Tremendous amount of things we have to work on. At the same time, what does God want to see more than anything else? At least trying to put in the effort. That's what He wants to see. He's not going to zap you, for you trying to put in effort. Now, we may think, put in enough effort, okay. But the evil inclination works in many different ways. Makes us lazy. Makes us very, very lazy. Yeah. At the same time, I would say, that doesn't matter, even if you have setbacks. You got to pick yourself back up. You got to get back in the saddle. You got to keep going, right? Anyone's ever played baseball, they know. What happens when you get hit by the ball? Yeah, it hurts. Right? It's coming 40 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, whatever it is. It hurts. Okay. What's the what's the coach going to say after the person gets hit? Yeah, besides, brush him off and whatever. What's he going to say? First thing is you got to get back in the batter's box. You got to get over, if you don't get over that fear, you're never going to be able to play the game. You got to get back in the batter's box. Yeah. But what's the person thinking when the back of the batter's box? They don't want to get hit. Right? That's the only thing they're thinking about. Yeah. So a person will never, be that good because they're just terrified. Right? Terrified of getting hit. But if you don't get back in the batter's box, you're never going to get over that fear. Right? If you don't get back in the saddle, you're never going to get back on the horse. Right? So if a person's going to think, well, I'm just down for the count and there's no way out, it's not true. That for sure is not true. Right? It says that a righteous person falls 7 times. Yeah, but he gets up. And we can fall more than 7 times. We can be down for the count. Could be. Yeah, and that's what the inclination wants. But, if we're holding somewhere in the world, it's part of life. Now, you don't want to get knocked so many times. You don't want to get knocked down so many times. But at the same time, you got to work at it. You got to make sure it doesn't happen. Okay, so, I got to make sure I'm not in this situation or that situation. And sometimes, a lot of times, let's say, we're not in control of certain situations. We're not in control. Now, the question is, how do I react? And, and what do I do? Right? That's the question. That's going to be the ultimate question. Right? What you do and how you're going to react. Now, are we in control of that? We're in control. We're not necessarily in control, what happens, in different circumstances. What we are potentially in control of, we should be in control of, is how we react. Now, we've spoken about this before, right? Without going too much into detail, when something happens, the person cannot have a knee-jerk reaction, right? Even in tough situations, you have to be in control. What does God want from me? What am I supposed to be doing? What should I be thinking? What should be my outlook? What should be the end game? Yeah, but not so easy because sometimes the person's thrown in a situation, totally out of whack, so to speak. Okay, what am I supposed to do now? How am I supposed to react? What am I supposed to do? Right? But a lot of times what happens? A lot of times a person in certain situation is going to just do that, just react. Yeah, when a person just reacts, very well could be, probably for the most part, this is the case. If a person just reacts, that means they're not thinking what they're doing. Right? They're just doing whatever their instinct tells them to do. It could be a good thing, maybe. Could not be a good thing. Right? But, that's what differentiates us from animals. Animals, have instinct. That's all they have. They can choose to eat, not eat, whatever, but they do what instinct tells them to do. Right? Now, we have an animalistic side to us. Very good. Right? As we mentioned before. Says Rav Opian, what differentiates us between us and animals? Right? Animals can say also, a person says, I can do what I want. Animals can also do what they want. We have one major difference. Says Rav Opian, what's the major difference? We have the ability to go against our desires. To go against our will. Animals can't do that. Now that's a huge thing. Yeah, but you have to go against your will to do it. We're not trapped, like animals are in that sense. We have a higher level soul, a much higher level soul. So we have the ability to make decisions, good decisions, bad decisions, right? But a decision should never be based on the fact of what happened before. And that you're just totally not thinking, knee-jerk reaction. I'll just do whatever the reaction is. That's bad. That's all God wants. Doesn't want a knee-jerk reaction, right? A person's supposed to be keeping Torah mitzvahs even when it's hard. Even when it seems impossible. It doesn't matter. You gotta do the best of your ability. But to just react, who says that's the right reaction? Maybe, in certain cases, maybe that reaction is the right reaction. So you got lucky. But if a person just reacts and doesn't think about what they're doing, who says that's the right action? Probably a lot of times not going to be the right action because the person's not thinking rationally. They're just reacting to whatever the situation is, right? a person has a relationship with someone, let's say, and a person says something, right? And whatever, you're kind of caught off guard, let's say. You're kind of caught off guard. But if you were really thinking, you wouldn't even, you'd answer this or you'd answer that or something else. But, you were caught off guard, you weren't thinking, let's say you were overtired or whatever, right? And all of a sudden you went bam, bam, bam. Now, you're going to justify why it was permissible, why you did it, and that, and why it's okay. But that was wrong, but if you think about it, if you weren't overtired, other things weren't going on, you would have answered the person totally different way. Because you thought about it, and you said, wow, that was the wrong reaction. And there's sometimes we do that. Someone says something, and all of a sudden we go, bam, we say something. You know where it came from. You know exactly where it came from. Yeah, but at the same time, if you would have really had a chance to think about it, that wouldn't have been your reaction. But there are times a person will say, you're not in control. You're not in control what happens, what people say, what people do, this and that. So you're going to say, can God hold that against you? How did you react? You can give a lot of excuses, and we're very good at that. Again, that's good before Yom Kippur. We could give a heck of a lot of excuses why we did this, that, or the other thing. And we can be justified why we did it. Okay. But if you had a chance to think about it and not give a quick reaction, would you have done the same thing? Right? What's the answer? Probably not. You wouldn't have done the same thing. You have answered like this, or you would have answered like that. Right? So we'll make excuses why you did what you did. You'll make excuses. And the question is God going to accept that as an excuse or not? God could say, okay, I'm going to play back the video. This is what you did. This is how you reacted. So you look at it and say, okay, maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe. I mean, if it's egregious, then you understand you made the wrong reaction. But okay. Yeah. God's going to say, all right, let me show you what you should have done. Let me show you what you should have said. If you would have said this, the repercussion would have been like this. It would have been a totally different thing. But you didn't. So a person can say, but I was under onus. Oh, really? What was the onus? I was sleep deprived. Yeah, I was tired. So I wasn't really clearly thinking. I don't know. Does God really want to hear that? You're right. You were tired. You were overtired. Good. Why were you overtired? Oh, let's go through this. Let's understand what you were going through in the first place and what led to it, whatever. Okay. But God can say, this is what I expected you to answer. This is what I wanted you to do. Yeah, but you didn't do it. And now I want to show you the repercussions. I want to show you the repercussions. There could be serious repercussions, less serious repercussions. Does that mean I have to be picture perfect at all times? It depends. Depends what God wants for a person. Depends what the source of their soul is. Depends what the end goal is. Why you were in that situation. What were you supposed to fix? What were you supposed to do? Right? So a lot of these things we're not in control of. Right? The circumstances weren't necessarily in control of. Right? So, some things maybe we are a little bit. Right? But a lot of things not. And for some things, it's only going to be how am I going to react? That's going to be the question. How is it that I'm going to react? And what's God going to say? Maybe the right thing, maybe the wrong thing. Right? That's going to be part of the second movie, what you did. First movie is what you did. Second movie is what the repercussions were for what you did. Yeah, and what your potential was. What you could have done. And a person can say, well, God has unrealistic expectations. No, I don't know about that. He put a soul in us to go into a certain body. Going into that body, it's going to help us reach our greatest potential in this world. Now, parents, we have no choice who they are. Siblings, we have no choice who they are. Socioeconomic situation, we don't have a choice. Yeah, so we're born against the world, we die against the world. Right? Couple would say in parentheses, still have to live. Okay. But even if that is the case, we still have to live, guess what? At the end of the day, this is the best way for me to reach my potential. Yeah? Because God put the soul in the body. God doesn't make mistakes. Why did he put it in this body, in another body? Okay, that's what God did. So now, with all these things I have to work with, that's going to help me reach my potential. And if not, what happens? I wasted it. But for every action we do, there's a reaction. And for every reaction that we see, how are we going to act or react? So that's what it's all about. But, a person will say, Torah wasn't given to Malchei Yesharis. Torah wasn't given to angels. Does God really expect us to be angels? No. But he expects people to reach their potential. Right? And he not only that, he gives them the ability to be able to reach their potential. We may think we can't, and it's too hard, and this and that. God has other expectations. Tremendous other expectations. So you can say, well, it's game over because life is so hard. Okay, life is hard. No one says it isn't. Right? But I have to know what to do, and I have to know how to apply what I learn. I have to live it. And I have to work hard. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's not. But in this discussion, about the evil inclination, all the evil inclination needs to do is convince us of certain things, put pressure on us, right? The evil inclination has its way, right? But even if that's the case, we got to be strong. And the only way you make yourself stronger, right, is Torah. That's what Torah does, right? For Jew or non-Jew, doesn't matter. It makes us stronger, 100%, right? It strengthens us spiritually. That's what it's supposed to do. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. And if I don't learn Torah, and I'm not as insular, what's going to happen? It'll affect me negatively. The world will affect me negatively. You don't have the tools to be able to deal with other things, right? So again, you have to learn Musar. You have to learn Torah. However much a person learns, they learn. Yeah, but at the end of the day, just like you have to take care of the body, and you got to feed the body, and you got to feed it well, right? Can't feed it with junk. Feed it with junk, it's going to be repercussions for that. So okay, so I have to have a balance. But yeah. First, I have to feed the body well, got to exercise, got to do other things, keep the body going. Very good. And what about the soul? Soul also needs to be fed. And if you don't feed the soul, what's going to happen? It'll die. It'll atrophy. Person's still alive, okay. But see how they live their lives. They live like an animal. They die like an animal, but they're not using Torah the way they should. So what differentiates them from an animal? You can say, what, you calling me an animal? How do you live your life? Where is the moral compass? Yeah, for us, the moral compass is Torah. Sometimes you do it better, sometimes worse, but the more we let it affect us, the more we don't fight against our evil inclination. And the evil inclination comes every day, every second of every day, doesn't stop. I gotta work hard. Right? It's gonna get knocked down. It means, I gotta work harder. And I gotta wake up and I gotta do things better and all that. Very good. Yeah, that's my obligation. But not to the point where a person feels they can't function in the world. And they can't do things. Yeah, because otherwise they're not going to keep it. They're not going to want to do it. Yeah, any questions? Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Saturday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Anyone has any questions, you can find me on Facebook at Machaim Coven, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I can videos, Q&As, ethics of our fathers, book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimcoven@gmail.com, RBBI, CHIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com. Which I'm good. Beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day, and